Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of IBDP Simplified. In today's episode, we'll be discussing about the subjects offered in Group 3, which is Humanities. We also have a set of guest speakers who will be talking about their experiences with the subject they chose in this group. So let's begin. Today we have Dhruv Garg with us. Welcome, Dhruv.
Yeah, hi Raghav. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So obviously, you've now been a part of IBDPs for almost a year now. So can you please share your experience and yeah, how has IBDP been so far for you?
Yeah, so as a whole, I think IB has been a great experience so far because it has that much needed structure, which I think MYP lacks a little bit.
Okay, so we know that you've taken economics at a higher level. So tell me, what are the different concepts that economics covers in like obviously in IBDP one?
Yeah, so basically, IB economics consists of I think three main units, which is microeconomics, macroeconomics, and the global economics. So far we've only covered microeconomics in the DP, and we focused on like the fundamentals, which include obviously supply and demand. Then we have the implementation, like the different types of market structures and the different types of economies, how the government intervenes in the market, and then we also learned about how economics is applied to our everyday lives. Like, for example, if you're driving a car, it causes pollution, which negatively impacts other people
Yeah.
in society, which is a negative consumption externality, and things like that. So I think it's been really good.
Okay. So given that now, obviously you're in economics HL, can you tell me the main difference between the SL economics and the HL economics?
Yeah, so being an HL student, we obviously have to apply ourselves a lot more in the specific units that we have. But I think a lot of the fundamentals and the key concepts are still the same, including, how economics is applied to our world and how we can solve those problems. But like in terms of what we're doing now, like there's theory of firms and how producers maximize their revenue and things like that, which are concepts that are more advanced and are only covered by students
Yeah.
at the higher level. So that's the key difference so far.
Okay, and this is my last question to you. What, according to you, is the major difference between like the curriculum in MYP and NDP?
So I think MYP and DP at the core are two completely different programs, right? So in MYP, the main goal is like for students to be exploring different fields and being exposed to how things happen in the real world. Whereas in DP, you are like narrowing your focus on a specific area. Like for example, if I'm enjoying the sciences, then I have the option to take two of them at the higher
Yeah.
level and dive deep into really what makes up those subjects, which the
Yeah.
option is not there in the MYP because there's integrated sciences. So I think the DP at the core is different because you can pick a field which you enjoy and really get to explore the specific details and like the key concepts of that field. And I think in
Yeah.
that sense, DP has a better structure because you are allowed to basically explore what you enjoy, right? And like
Yeah.
for some people who don't like doing certain subjects, they can choose to drop them altogether, which is really nice. And as well as that, like I spoke about the assessments, I feel are better structured because obviously you have marks now
Marks.
instead of a grade boundary. So that is a good change. Obviously, the workload is greater in DP, so you have to prepare yourself more for that. But otherwise, I think the DP is overall a good program.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything else that you would want to say to people who might be considering taking economics next year?
So for economics specifically, there's a lot of theoretical stuff which you will have to. So I would recommend preparing yourself by just flipping through the textbook in your vacation that you have. Just flip through the textbook and just read a bit about the concepts that are there. But more than that, I think if you actually have a keen interest in economics, then you should start reading about things that are happening in the real world. For example, There's sources like any newspaper, the Economic Times, things like that really give you context about what's happening in the real world. And then you can, over time, as you start learning, apply basically whatever you learn in class to real life, which I think really helps you build better and deeper connections with a subject, and also
Right.
can help you perform better because you're more connected to, and you understand basically how what you're learning in class translates to something that's happening in the real world, which I think gives you a good insight.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Dhruv. Today we have Janvi Chaudhary with us who has taken GPHL. So, hello, Janvi.
Hi, hello.
Hi. Okay. So, obviously, I would first like to ask you your experience with GP and how has it been so far?
I think GP is one of the most fun subjects and classes to be in because it's very interactive and you get to hear other people's opinions on certain topics and you can debate with everyone in class. So, yeah, it's definitely my most fun class.
Okay. Tell me more about GP. Tell me what it expects from its students. You being an HL student, obviously, you can tell me more about it.
I think your basic prerequisite, obviously, you have to know all the issues and events going around the world. But apart from that, you have to sort of know different perspectives on that issue, right? You
Yeah.
have to look at different ways to look at a certain issue, something like that.
Right. Okay. And up till now, obviously, it's just been 1 year. How many or what are the different concepts that you've covered in this subject?
We finished our unit power, sovereignty, and global politics. So we did power, we did legitimacy, what makes a state legitimate. We did how a state can become sovereign and how there have been debates and criticisms on whether sovereignty is actually a thing. We discussed how interdependence is what the world is going for right now, and we discussed the pros and cons of interdependence. And we're going to start our human rights unit soon.
Okay, I think that's a great overview of the subject that you've given. Now coming to obviously the other subjects as well, because obviously you have other two HLs and also other three, you have three more SLs that you have to manage. So tell me, how do you manage all of the curriculum and how do you manage time or how do you divide your time among these subjects?
Yeah, initially, even I struggled with managing time since I didn't know how much time to give to each subject. But then, as the year went along, I realized you have to know which subjects you're weak at and which subjects you're strong at. For
Yeah.
example, I know that for maths and English, I'm pretty weak at that. So instead of, I'll spend 3 days a week doing that and the rest of the days doing my other subjects. So to get all of them at a good high grade.
So obviously in MYP now, as you know, that we had INS as a subject, which was an integration of all of these subjects such as economics, business management, GP, history, psychology.
Yes.
But
Yep.
obviously now that we have one specific subject for global politics, what has that as a difference? What difference has that made for you to grasp more knowledge or get in more details, get into the depth of the concepts and all?
So I think INS is a great base for any social science that you're taking in the DP because it basically explores different aspects of different social sciences. And for GP, it's helped me a lot, right? Because in GP, you have to
Yeah.
know a lot of research skills and you have to, cite your sources, write long research papers and all of that, right? So the INS has definitely helped me in that. And also, as we notice, a lot of the units in GP we've done in INS. So, for example, human rights. I could talk a lot about human rights in class because we've done it in INS before. So, I
Yeah.
think INS helps build a great base for GP or any social science you take. But also, again, you'll have to practice on your writing skills and your time management skills.
Okay, great. So obviously, that was the set of questions that I had for you. Anything you want to say about the students who are willing to pick GP, who are currently in 10th grade?
I think you guys, GP is a great subject. You should definitely go for it because it not only if even if you're not taking GP as a subject in your college, it really helps you when you're meeting people from different cultures, different places to sort of connect with them on a
Yeah.
level that they understand. So your relationships in life with different people later on will also be easier to make and more long lasting.
Great, great. So
Thank you.
Okay, now we have Kashi Singhal from grade 11 who will be talking about her experience in BM business management so far. So, firstly, Kashi, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dhruv. Thank you for calling me here.
No
How
problem.
about you?
I'm good, doing good too. Thank you. So, Kashi, you've taken BMHL. So, can you tell our listeners, our audience, a bit about the content that you cover in BM, what all you've learned so far, and what all is part of your syllabus that you're going to cover later?
So far, like we've only had 2 semesters of BM, but basically, I think business management as a subject has 5 main units.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we have completed introduction to BM and finance. Finance is one of the main units in BM, and it includes a lot of quantitative elements such as making a balance sheet, profit and loss account. So some people
Okay.
find it challenging, but overall it's interesting. And we are going to do marketing next.
Okay.
So BM as a subject has several tools and 5 main units, under which we have around 7 to 8 units for each of them. So in a total, it's just like 40 chapters, but the it's made in such a way that it doesn't feel that vast.
Right. Okay. And can you tell us a bit about the differences between BMHL and BMSL?
So I'm a BM HL student. So
Right.
I don't think there's too much difference in SL and HL, but the main difference that I've noticed is that some chapters, like for example, depreciation and
Mhm.
such things that we have in HL, SL people do not. So
Okay.
even during our assessment so far, more or less the paper is the same. However, like maybe one case study differs from HL to SL. That's
Okay.
all.
Right. And how does BM relate to maybe some unit or some activities you've done previously in MYP? I'm guessing most likely you'll have done them in INS.
Yeah. So overall, we've not done like actual BM in MYP
Right.
before.
Right.
However, I remember in grade 9, we had this one summative where we had to make a business plan for a business we wanted to start in our country.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that was under the globalization unit, though. I'm not quite sure. And
Yeah.
then in grade 10, again, we did a Shark Tank activity where we came up with a business idea. We made a business pitch and then we pitched it to different teachers. And like, I remember our teacher invited like the design department and the other INS teachers as well.
Right.
So those are the two things that we did in MYP. That was like introduction to business for me.
Okay. And so, obviously a big part of MYP are the ATL skills that we work so hard on developing in our journey in MYP. So, can you tell us a bit about how ATL skills have helped you so far and what ATL skills you find the most applicable to the subject of BM?
So overall, I feel like BM is a subject where you need all ATL skills like any other subject in DB, but I think thinking and self-management would be the most appropriate in my opinion, because thinking you need to like there are many options or many answers you can give to the question that has been asked, but you need to analyze and apply each and every point that you are stating. So you need to think properly and then start writing your answer, because we have a 60-minute BM paper and you get 3 case studies within that. So that's where self-management also plays a role, because you need to manage your time and your responses in a way that you can complete all like all the 3 case studies and all your answers with equal quality. Otherwise, I've noticed that some of my peers, they often lack in the third case study. Why? Because they haven't managed their time well. And
Right.
that was something that we struggled initially in. Like I myself did struggle initially in. So just if you ensure that you manage your time and your responses well and use self-management and thinking skills, then you will be good.
So, Kashi, you just mentioned how you at the start of the year too struggled to manage your time during your summatives. However, now you feel you're fairly comfortable with that. Um, what do you think you did that helped you develop in this area? Was it just practicing case studies that helped you manage your time, or are there any specific tips or tricks that you use that you would recommend to our listeners?
So honestly, I feel like for any subject personally, it's just about knowing the content. The
Okay.
reason that most of us struggled initially was because we used to write very lengthy answers. And
Okay.
you see that uh, in BM you get your question paper and your answer paper is the same. So you're writing in the given space. So if you
Okay.
restrict your words and use good terminology, which I really recommend you knowing the definitions of most of the business terms,
Mm-hmm.
and repeatedly revising it, not just before your summative. I think that will help you frame your answers in a way that in one word, I can say what I wanted to say in like 2 lines. And
Okay.
that way, I learn how to manage my time. And I still struggle in that a little, but eventually, you keep getting better. And the more concepts you get introduced to in class, the more you revise at home. In DP, like, don't take any subject for granted, even if you feel like it's easy. Make it like your strength, and you know, the more you revise and the more you practice, it will ensure that you get a consistent score in that. So my only advice to listeners will be that you have 6 subjects in DP and neither of them are going to be easy, even if people believe that they are. So
Right.
just make sure you have consistent effort put into all of them, and yeah, you'll hack DP.
Okay. So that was some great advice, Kashi. Thank you. My final question to you would be, what is the one piece of advice you would give to the people listening to the podcast? It can be about IBDP in general or specific to the subject of BM.
Um, Honestly, I feel like you will have heard this many a times, but time management.
Right.
MYP and DP is very different. And I'm so glad that through this podcast that Dhruv is doing, you will get an idea of what DP is more about.
Mhm.
So, like in MYP, it's more project based. However, in
Right.
DP, it's assessment based. So you need to start, like in your summer break itself, start getting a hang of writing everything because you will not be typing anything in DP. So start writing your responses, start learning how to frame your words quickly because all these things when we are typing it's very different than writing. Like for example, our English paper, I believe that Dhruv, you will agree with me that we never had the practice of writing so much that we need to right now.
Right.
So that's somewhere most of us struggle in. So like get a hang of writing in this summer break so that you don't face that difficulty like we did.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Kashi, for your time and effort today. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have Achin Dukkal from grade 11 who will be talking about her experience in psychology so far. So first of all, Achint, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. So, Ajit, to start off, can you tell us a bit about what you learn in psychology? Like, what is the content covered in psychology?
All right. So it's been like 7, 8 months that I've been in IBDP, and so far we have completed 2 out of the 3 core topics, which would be biological approach and cognitive approach. And we would now be starting to learn like sociocultural approach. The biological approach is where we understand the mechanics of how your brain and body works and how that affects your behavior and your human psychology. So that is like your basic human thought, feeling, or emotion, and how it is related to your biological processes like neurotransmitters, hormones, pheromones, and how that affects the behavior. Then cognitive approach is more about how we think and how we use our information available to us to process it, like how our memories are stored and retrieved, and how we use it to make decisions that could be rational or irrational. And lastly, sociocultural is something about how the groups that we belong to in communities affect the way we think and act. So that's all we have studied so far. But later on, it's going to be more about the optional content and also HL extensions.
Right. So, you mentioned the term HL extensions. So, can you tell us a bit about the difference between psychology SL and psychology HL?
Yeah. So I was both in Psych HL and SL for one. So in Psych SL, I only was exposed to the first two. I mean, like, yeah, first 2 papers, which is mostly content based. That is biological approach, sociocultural approach, and cognitive approach. But when you're doing paper 3 also, which is HL extension, at the end of each approach, you have a little bit extra that you have to learn that is asked in an HL extension. And also more focus is given to research methods, that is quantitative and qualitative research. And like the only difference is that you have to analyze these research methods and then
focus on the structures and mechanisms that help those psychologists to conduct their experiments, and that is exactly what you learn about. And it's actually not a lot of memorization. So if you're not good at memorization or something, you could be very good at psych HL. So yeah.
Okay, so um, my next question would be, how does what you're learning in psychology in DP right now link to something you might have covered in MYP in probably INS or one of your other subjects?
Yeah, we haven't covered like psychology in MYP obviously, but a little bit has been done in INS because it explores like societies and social interactions and cultures and like the individual psychology you would have in a society, in a community, and how, social and cultural factors would impact your human behavior, and all of that would be more greatly linked with socio-cultural approach and much more in depth in psychology. So like a little bit is exposed to you in MYP.
Okay. So also, like a major focus of MYP is on developing our ATL skills. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about what ATL skills you use on a daily basis or in psychology and how they help you out with this subject?
So in psychology, the most important ATL skill would be self-management, because the papers that you're told to write are like short answer questions and essay response questions, which are 9 markers and 22 markers, and they have no limit. So you could be writing as much as you want to cover the content for it. So you need to find a time frame in which you could be able to answer all of that accordingly. So self management is the key ATL skill. Then also critical thinking and communication, because that's just going to get more information to you by talking to other people, and research and social skills too.
So, when we're talking about psychology, obviously a big part of our content also revolves around those different studies that we learn about in class. So, and those studies are obviously a key part of our curriculum and how we write even our tests. So, can you just tell our listeners a bit about what those studies are, how they work, and how we use them?
Yeah. So this is not like every other IB subject you would have. You would need to memorize your content over here instead of just understanding it. So the studies that we get, there are researchers who have conducted studies that have an aim to it, sample or participants that are in the study. There's a technique and a method used in it, and then they follow a standardized procedure. And obviously, then there are the results on the findings. So you have to remember like the key and the detailed points of these studies, like the year and the method and the procedure, and obviously the results, and then link it back to the concept that you have learned, which is added in your introduction and conclusion. So you'll completely understand the concept, the study, and then you use your own knowledge to build up your conclusion in your test.
Okay, great. So, my last question to you would be, what is the one piece of advice you would give anyone about IBDP in general?
The one thing I would say is not to leave your work for the last minute, because then it's just going to be too much and you're going to get overwhelmed 100%. So, especially with psych, because there's like the more you keep studying psych, the more the number of studies increase and the concepts increase. So you can't just do one approach and then forget about it and then continue the next approach. So it's something you have to continuously practice, and yeah, not leave it for the last minute.
Right. Okay. So that was it, Achin. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, and I hope you have a great day ahead.
Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day.
Today we have Dhruv Shetty with us, who has taken history SL for his IBDP. So hello, Dhruv.
Hi, Raghav.
So obviously, my first question to you is about your subject, which is history SL. And could you tell me a bit
Yeah.
about the concepts that you guys have covered in this subject?
So for history, there are kind of three topics or three sections in which the entire subject is broken down. First is the IB prescribed topics, and there are quite a few in this. There are around 12 or something like that. So we chose a topic known as Move to Global War, where we essentially focused on several key wars, which are World War One, World War Two, and we looked at them in detail as separate case studies. And over like the first sem, we discussed and wrote our summatives based on those two topics. As of now, we're moving on to the optional topics, optional units where we can choose our topics and kind of move forward. Yeah.
Okay. Now, could you tell me the major difference between history HL and history SL?
Um, I think primarily the only key difference that I see is the fact that there's an additional whole topic for history HL where they can choose a time in history or a period in history and they can learn about it completely. While for SL, we only have a set number of topics we can do. HL has a whole other unit based on what they want to do, and with that, there comes an extra paper. So, history HL will have three papers altogether. Two of them will be common with SL, but yeah, that's pretty much the difference. Which is that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we all know that in MYP we had INS, or Individuals and Science, or Individuals and Society, sorry, as a subject where history and economics and all of these subjects were covered. But now that we
Yeah.
have, or in DP we have a completely different subject for history. So tell me the difference between MYP and DP, and uh, have you been able to learn in a bit more detail about history because of this split?
Um, I think INS last year prepared you for this course of history very. I mean, it touched the tip of the iceberg. It was only the tip of the iceberg. So, I think source analysis, which is paper one for history, is very detailed. You have to kind of extract every piece of information from the source you have. So that way, INS doesn't fully prepare you for that. While certain tasks which we did in 10th showed me how to analyze sources and all of that, but in history it takes it to another level. Especially, I think paper one was is going to be quite critical of that analysis, and I think paper two, where we have to compare and contrast, is that is something I never did in MYP for INS in to be more specific. So I think INS, while it does prepare you for the research aspect of it, which would greatly help you in the IA, paper one and paper two, you relatively have to put more effort into understanding how the paper itself works and what you need to do in order to get the higher marks and go for the sixes and sevens for the subject. Yeah.
Okay, so my final question to you is, what exactly does history as a subject expect from its students, be it HL or SL?
I think with the um, broad nature of this topic and the amount of options we have, I guess it really is about informing us of about the world around us firstly, and to allow us to reflect on what's already happened. I think many of these messages or takeaways are common in TOK as well, because we often find ourselves reflecting and making connections to between both the subjects on how each maybe leader or people or societies could have maybe been more open to certain topics and accepted certain things in society, etc. So I think as students, it does kind of expect us to develop that global perspective, um, which history demands of us, and allow and make us kind of develop those opinions, which we can further elaborate on in paper one and paper two as well. So yeah, I think it's kind of getting that open or broad mindset to think from multiple perspectives. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And
Yeah.
finally, would you like to say anything else or to the audience?
I think yeah, history is definitely an interesting subject to pursue. It has there are minimal risks with it. I think it's definitely if for people who do like history, it'll be quite a fascinating topic for you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time, Dhruv.
All right, guys, so that's it for today. We hope that the interviews were helpful and you learned something about whatever subjects you've chosen.
Please like, share, and subscribe, guys.
And hit the bell icon.
Bell icon for further notifications.
Thank you. Bye bye.